An in-depth look at Josh Allen's 2022 season and what to pay attention to in the weekend ahead is all coming your way today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Friday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. Well, folks, we have an extra day here. The Bills play on Monday Night Football, so it gives us an opportunity to dig into some different things here on the podcast. And so what I want to do is open our conversation today by looking at Josh Allen through the lens that we look at all the other quarterbacks through. So when I preview a game and I do that entire segment on the opposing quarterback, I want to apply all of that to Josh Allen here in our opening segment. Then I want to talk about some of the newsy stuff that's come through regarding the Buffalo Bills as they close the week here and get ready for the Bengals on Monday night. And then lastly, it's a big weekend in college football. The playoff games are happening. And so I want to go through some of the NFL draft prospects to watch in those games with an eye towards the Buffalo Bills. So if you want to watch TCU and Michigan and Ohio State and Georgia on Saturday night and know who some of the players the Bills could be interested in are, I want to give that to you here to close out the week on the podcast. Our typical Friday podcast, or that last podcast that we do before the Bills game, that'll happen on Monday. And that'll be my leftover thoughts. We'll talk to Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills about injuries. And then, of course, my 5 predictions for the game. So that'll be there for you on Monday because we have the extra day this week because the Bills play on Monday Night Football. So let's do the thing with Josh Allen here. And so just like I would a quarterback the Bills were playing, I'm going to do it all for Josh Allen. So Josh Allen is 26 years old. He's 6'5", 240 pounds, was the number 7 overall pick in the 2018 NFL Draft out of Wyoming. So far, he has started 75 games for the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills have a 51-24 record across those 75 starts. So far in 2022, he's completing 63.4% of his passes, 269 passing yards per game, 32 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, and a passer rating of 96.1. Of course, when it comes to Josh Allen, it's not just about passing numbers. He's very good on the ground as well. His rushing statistics this year, 746 rushing yards, which is 6.5 yards per carry, 7 rushing touchdowns. Let's look at his metrics. And these metrics will include all 37 quarterbacks in the NFL with at least 150 dropbacks. Josh Allen's average time to throw is 2.85 seconds. That is 26th out of 37 quarterbacks in the NFL. So Josh Allen, not necessarily a fast-triggered quarterback. He never really has been. And that's always going to be the case because he does have that ability to work off script and extend plays. And so just naturally, because of that skill set that he has, he's going to hold onto the football a little bit more and push that number up. And so a lot of times we celebrate quick-triggered quarterbacks. Josh Allen's just not that type of player. Now, he can still execute quick passes, but when you have what Josh Allen has at his disposal, there are times where you want to hold on to the football, and that's always going to inflate that metric. I will say that for Josh Allen's career, it's definitely a number that is lower than usual, but I don't think you're ever going to look at Josh Allen and say this is one of the quickest triggered quarterbacks in the NFL. 43% of the time, Josh Allen releases the football in under 2.5 seconds, which means 57% of the time he holds on to it for longer than 2.5 seconds. Let's look at those splits. When Josh Allen gets it out quick, under 2.5 seconds, he completes 71% of his passes, 6.2 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 102.6. That passer rating of 102.6 when he throws the ball in under 2.5 seconds is 11th in the NFL. When he throws the ball or holds onto the ball for over 2.5 seconds before throwing it, Josh Allen completes 57% of his passes, 8.9 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 90. Now, that passer rating of 90 is actually 14th in the NFL, so kind of middle of the pack. But where that number is heavily impacted is because 11 of his 13 interceptions this year have come under those circumstances. He's only thrown 2 interceptions when releasing the ball in under 2.5 seconds. And so that is definitely bringing down that passer rating when holding on to the football. And so for Josh Allen, I think it would probably be good for him to be a little bit more selective in those moments when he's trying to pull the trigger and push the ball down the field and hold on to the ball to not put it in harm's way. Josh Allen's average depth of target is 9.4 yards from the line of scrimmage. That's 8th in the NFL. 14% of Josh Allen's passing attempts are 20-plus yards down the field. That is 12th in the NFL. When Josh throws the ball 20 yards or more down the field, he's completing 32 of 75 passes, 1,079 yards, 9 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, passer rating of 109.7. That 109.7 passer rating is 8th highest in the NFL on deep throws. And Josh Allen actually has the most completions and yards of any quarterback in the NFL on throws 20 yards or more down the field. Play action. 25.7% of Josh Allen's dropbacks are play action, which is 19th in the NFL. You've probably heard me say this before, but I wish that was about 10% higher. I'd like to see Josh Allen in the mid-30s when it comes to percentage of dropbacks that are play action. I just think that it plays really well into the style of quarterback that he is. It kind of holds the second level of the defense and allows Josh Allen to attack the defense a little further down the field, and it creates those opportunities. So I'd like to see Ken Dorsey really ramp up the amount of play action that he's using with Josh Allen. Let's look at Josh Allen's splits when he does have play action versus when he doesn't have play action. With play action, he's completing 69% of his passes, 8.4 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 110.7. So you could see right there, those numbers are awesome when he does get to use play action. Almost 70% completion percentage, 8.4 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 110.7. Without play action, he's still a good quarterback, but he completes 61% of his passes, 7.2 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 90.6. So I would love a little 10% spike in play action for Josh Allen. I think that would be good for him. It'd be good for the offense. Screens, not a big part of the equation here, and I know that a lot of people are annoyed by that. I get a lot of questions about screens and why the Bills aren't good at running screens. They're just not, and I think, part of it is Josh Allen as a dual threat quarterback and that invoking a lot of man coverage. There's eyes in the backfield, right? The key to a screen is really kind of catching the defense in man, potentially in some pressure looks, and the Bills don't really invite a whole lot of that. And so I think it's always going to be hard for them to run screens. But Josh Allen only attempts a screen pass on 6.9% of his passes. That's 29th in the NFL, so a very low percentage of passes that are screens. And his yards per attempt on screens is exactly 4, which is 33rd out of 37 quarterbacks. So, yep, you're exactly right. The Bills are not a very effective screen team. They don't do it a ton, but it's also not very effective. Let's talk about pressure splits. This is an area that's very, very intriguing to me when it comes to Josh Allen. When Josh Allen's kept clean, he completes 68% of his passes, 7.4 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 96.8. And this is another area that I want to emphasize the interceptions a little bit. Josh Allen's passer rating of 96.8 when kept clean is actually not very good. That's 24th in the NFL. And that's because 10 of his 13 interceptions came when he was not pressured. So we know that 11 of them came when he held onto the football for more than 2.5 seconds, and 10 of those came when he was not pressured. And so those are just some throws that Josh Allen needs not to make to cut down on some of the interceptions. But what's interesting about the pressure splits is, every week we go through this conversation and I talk about how just significantly worse the quarterback is when they're pressured. Not the case with Josh Allen. Completes 51% of his passes, 7.9 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 94.1. Josh Allen, with a 94.1 passer rating under pressure, claims the best number one passer rating in the NFL under pressure, and actually 7.9 yards per attempt is number one. So Josh Allen is statistically the best quarterback in the entire NFL when he's pressured. And that's a great attribute. Being able to hold up and still keep plays alive and make good plays when you're pressured is not something most quarterbacks can do. Normally we go through this and I tell you the passer rating comes down 30, 40 points. Well, for Josh Allen, it only goes down 2.7 points. In fact, when you compare his kept clean versus under pressure splits, the completion percentage comes down 17%, which you would expect. But he actually gains a half a yard in yards per attempt, and the passer rating only comes down 2.7 points. So Josh Allen's ability to handle pressure is obviously a big strength of his game and a big asset for this Bills offense. Lastly, another very compelling talking point, it's his blitz splits. With no blitz, Josh Allen completes 66% of his passes, 8.1 yards per attempt, passer rating of 100. With the blitz, 57% completion, 6.2 yards per attempt, passer rating of 86.4. That passer rating with the blitz, 32nd out of 37 quarterbacks that qualify. And so this has been like a 2-year thing with Josh. 2020, Josh Allen with the blitz was like the best in the league, or one of the best in the league at handling the blitz. Over the last 2 seasons, we've seen Josh Allen's passer rating when blitzed come down pretty considerably. And, when measured across the other quarterbacks in the NFL, doesn't stack up very favorably. And I think a lot of this has to do with the offense not necessarily being correct on when to protect and when to throw hot. I think the Bills have to do a little better job of baking in some more sight adjustments for the receivers. Like if guys are going to blitz, to know to adjust your route so that Josh Allen can get the ball out of his hands quicker. But I feel like in those instances, they're not doing a good enough job of just kind of replacing the blitz with the ball and identifying those pressures that are coming and adjusting routes. I don't think it's happening with enough consistency. I don't think it's an issue of Josh Allen not being able to handle the blitz. I think it's an issue of the offense maybe not having the correct answers baked in like it did in 2020 when dealing with the blitz. So this is definitely an area of the Bills offense and for Josh Allen to grow here and be better. Because if I'm a team going up against the Bills, I'm going to be interested in tapping into some pressure looks, knowing that Josh Allen, he just hasn't been as effective. The offense hasn't been as effective. So there you go. There's Josh Allen's metrics and splits. I hope you found that to be useful. I mean, we do this for every other quarterback, and usually about once a year I'll apply it to Josh Allen, and I thought today would be a good opportunity to do that so everyone can have that context necessary when I talk about these other players. What's Josh Allen doing? Well, the last 14 minutes, he got that answer. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, your parents can tell, everyone can tell. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive high, you're not. Because the bottom line is if you feel different, you drive different, and driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI, paid for by NHTSA. All right, let's talk about some of the Bills news, and this is stuff that you'll want to pay attention to over the weekend before our next conversation on Monday. The first nugget here is that Mitch Morse was cleared of the concussion protocol, and he practiced in full on Thursday. And that's a big boost for the Bills' offensive line. We know that Mitch Morse is outstanding. He's a Pro Bowler this year. But what he means for the run game with the range that he has, right, getting out in space and pulling, and I think where the Bills have had a lot of success with James Cook and Devin Singletary of late is getting those offensive linemen on the move. Well, Mitch Morse might be the best pulling offensive lineman that the Bills have. And so getting him back into the fray is really going to be helpful for the rushing offense. I know that he didn't miss like a ton of time, like a game and a half. But I think we should be excited about what he can mean for the options the Bills have running the football against Cincinnati. And the Bengals have two very, very good defensive tackles, one of them being B.J. Hill and the other guy being DJ Reader, who is just – I've talked a lot about DJ Reader this week on the podcast, and that's because he's just a good player. I mean, he's big, aggressive, physical, athletic guy. And having Mitch Morse back in the lineup to set the depth of the pocket, but also be able to use that technique and body positioning to seal him off in the run game and then using Mitch to get out in space as well, I think is going to boost this offense. I mean, let's keep in mind that really you think about the second half of Miami, you don't have Mitch Morse, right? Greg Van Roten has to go over to center. You didn't have Ryan Bates in that game, so it was Questenberry coming in and playing right guard. And then last week you get Bates back, but you lose Morse. And so, Bates has to go play center, Van Roten at right guard. It just, you didn't have the center and right guard stable over the last 6 quarters. Well, that gets to change this week. And I'm excited to see it because I think the Bills are at their best, obviously, when they have Bates and when they have Mitch Morse up front. So great to see Mitch Morse clearing concussion protocol and back into the mix. The Bills also opened the 21-day window to return for Christian Benford, rookie cornerback out of Villanova. He returned to practice on Thursday, and the Bills now have 21 days to either put him on the active roster or his season is over. And so we'll see how that all comes together. I'm sure injuries could play a factor in that. If the Bills are healthy and they're satisfied with their cornerbacks, then they can shut Benford down and we'll say, see you next year. But if Christian Benford can get up to speed after being on injured reserve for 4 weeks with an oblique injury, I think he's a better player than Cam Lewis. And Benford has played some special teams and obviously given the team some reasonably sound play at corner. And you love to have him in the mix if you have an injury to any of, Trey White, Dane Jackson, Kyer Elam. So I'm hopeful that the Bills can ramp him up and get him to a place where he can take Cam Lewis's spot on the roster. I think the best thing that Cam Lewis has going for him is that ability to also play safety. Now, I don't know how good he is at safety. I'm not sure he's that good at corner. I think he's okay at special teams. And you've now positioned yourself at safety to have Poyer, to have Jaquan Johnson, to have DeMar Hamlin, and you have Dean Marlowe. So do you need that fifth safety? To me, I'd rather have Benford. But obviously, I think the Bills will kind of let things play out, let Christian Benford ramp up, but just knowing that over the next 20 days, you have an opportunity here with Christian Benford. And I think you let the circumstances that are inevitably going to come over the next couple of weeks dictate whether or not you activate Benford. But I think if he could be activated and replace Cam Lewis, and the Bills could be a better football team because I think Benford's a better player than Cam Lewis. The last thing I want to mention here in this segment before we talk about NFL draft prospects to watch is there's one game of consequence this week for the Buffalo Bills because the Bills are locked into a top 3 seed in the AFC. They could be 1, 2, or 3. That's it. There's no other options. And so if the Bills don't beat the Bengals, then we can have conversations about wild card opponents, but we don't have to live in that world right now. The one game of consequence is the Chiefs playing the Broncos in Kansas City, 1 o'clock Eastern time on Sunday. I mean, I think the Chiefs are like a 2-touchdown favorite. They should be a 2-touchdown favorite. The Broncos are not a good football team. But what the Broncos did do this week is they fired their head coach, Nathaniel Hackett, which comes as no surprise to any member of Bills Mafia, right? We knew Nathaniel Hackett wasn't head coaching material when he was the offensive coordinator for this team. You know, he just wasn't that type of guy. But there are a lot of instances in the world of football and sports in general where for one game, you kind of get a bump, right? You get a one-game bump for firing your coach. That interim coach comes in, the team kind of rallies, and they play well, and they win. Now, listen, I'm going to be the last guy on the earth to predict the Broncos to beat the Chiefs, but I think you can kind of piece it together and feel reasonably good about this might being the best thing for Denver as a rallying opportunity to potentially go and knock off the Chiefs. Not predicting it, not expecting it, but it would be nice to have that wiggle room. Now, Chiefs are obviously a great football team, but they haven't been dominant all season. They've been very vulnerable. The Texans took them to overtime, right? You're telling me the Broncos can't be competitive as a division opponent, right? So I'm interested. I'm interested. I'm not counting anything. I'm not counting on anything, but that's the game of consequence for the Bills. If the Chiefs lose, if somehow the Chiefs lose to the Broncos, the Bills will be in a situation where Monday night they beat Cincinnati, they clinch the 1 seed. You'd love that, right? I mean, that would be amazing. Otherwise, you just have to beat the Bengals and the Patriots, and you have the 1 seed. So the Bills, they control their own destiny, but obviously you'd love to have as much help as possible. And so go Broncos. Go Broncos. Because, look, the Chiefs next week, week 18, they play the Raiders. And I know it's in Vegas, but the Raiders basically just waved the white flag, right? They're benching Derek Carr as their quarterback, who's left the facility. He's gone, right? They're leaning on Jarrett Stidham. They want to see some young players. You think that's going to help them beat the Chiefs in week 18? And especially because the Chiefs have to keep playing. They have to keep playing because there's no scenario where they could clinch the 1 seed sooner than week 18. Because the Bills and the Bengals have head-to-head wins over Kansas City. So the game of consequence is Chiefs-Broncos, and pray for a miracle that Denver somehow puts it together and gets a win. But obviously the Bills take care of their business. They're the 1 seed. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball. They've got it all over at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well over at BetOnline. They are always the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting information. So head on over to the website or use your mobile device to learn more. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. All right, if you're like me, you're excited for Saturday. Got some big-time college football upon us. The playoffs, TCU against Michigan, Ohio State against Georgia. So if you want to watch those games and know who the players that I think would have the most interest to the Buffalo Bills, I'm going to give them to you right now. Let's start with TCU and Michigan. For TCU, wide receiver, wears number 1, Quentin Johnston. Big, explosive guy that can win down the field. Think Martavis Bryant here. You remember him for the Steelers out of Clemson? You know, he kind of had some issues that shortened his career, but that type of physical talent where you have like 6'3", 6'4", but just a really uncanny ability to get in and out of breaks for that type of size. And so I don't know that there's a world where he gets to the end of the first round. Might be a reasonable chance he's the first receiver drafted, but certainly someone to keep an eye on. Their left guard, Steve Avila, wears number 79. He's a physical blocker that I think has starter potential in the NFL at guard. Keep an eye on him. Their running back, 33, Kendre Miller. The Bills want a size, big physical running back to add to their backfield. potentially on day 3. He's someone to monitor. And then number 98, edge rusher Dylan Horton, explosive, bendy, pass rusher with good length. I think he's kind of a mid-round guy. So if the Bills wanted to add to that room, which is totally possible, Shaq Lawson's an expiring contract. AJ Epinesa enters a contract year next year. You never know. They could be interested in some defensive end help as well. So for TCU, those 4 players are the ones that I'd be keeping an eye on. For Michigan, wide receiver number 8, Ronnie Bell. Speed and ball skills. And I think the Bills could use that. I think they'll probably draft a receiver in this coming draft, potentially early. And not that I think, that Ronnie Bell's a super high pick, but somewhere in the middle rounds, if they wanted to get a guy with some speed, Ronnie Bell would make sense. I love their center, number 55. Got a tough name to pronounce here, so I think it's Olusegun Oluwatimi, double O. We'll call him that. Transfer from Virginia, went to Michigan this year. Some people think he might be the best center in the country, at least in terms of college football. Probably mid-round pick that has starter ability. He intrigues me a lot. They have 2 defensive linemen to keep an eye on. Number 90, Mike Morris, is a edge rusher that kind of checks a lot of the boxes we've seen the Bills typically prefer in defensive ends, guys that have the ability to kind of reduce inside, play with length and extension. Probably a day 2 pick. And then Mozzie Smith, big nose tackle, number 58. The Bills could be in the market for this type of player. Jordan Phillips, an expiring contract. Mozzie Smith would kind of give them that big-bodied player that can clog up running lanes, but also gives you some juice as a pass rusher, as a pocket pusher that can really dial it up from time to time and use some explosiveness to go with his size. So for Michigan, those would be the guys I'd be focusing in on. Ohio State and Georgia. On the Ohio State side of things, I got 2 players for you. Now, they got a lot of guys here. Just, C.J. Stroud, their quarterback, he'll probably be, a top 10, top 15 pick. They got some young receivers that are interesting. But through that Bills lens, their center, number 53, Luke Weipler. I really like him. He's athletic, rangy, not necessarily the biggest center, but a technician, and he's smart. And I think that those are typically the good qualities of a center. And maybe he could play some guard. Obviously, the Bills have Mitch Morse locked up for the next 2 seasons, but Luke Weipler is a potential developmental backup and a guy that can maybe challenge for a starting role at guard. And then defensive end Zach Harrison. I could see the Bills really liking him. Big-time recruit. Looks like he's built in a lab, right? Just all the length and size you'd want from a defensive end. And he dials it up from time to time, and you realize that he's a really special physical talent with his length, with his burst. He forces a lot of fumbles. I like watching him play. Maybe he was a slight underachiever as a 5-star recruit, but I think he's got a high ceiling to continue developing into. So day 2 type player all day long. And then for Georgia, I'll give you kind of a maybe one that would surprise you, but they have a tight end there that really intrigues me. He wears number 0, Darnell Washington. He's like 270 pounds, 6'7", 270. He blocks like you would expect for that type of player. And he's also a pretty good receiver as well. And so I think he'd probably be a second-round pick for the Bills if they were to go this route. But if you think about how often they use Bobby Hart as this utility blocker, I think you get all of that blocking ability plus some receiving skill that I think could help you as a team that wants to run, kind of a tack-off tackle that likes to keep guys in to block from time to time, that can give you a big body in the middle of the field. I would not hate it. I think he could be a true X factor, and I think someone's going to take him between pick 25 and 60, and they're going to get a really, really unique football player. Both of Georgia's tackles are worth paying attention to. Left tackle, number 59, Broderick Jones. Right tackle, number 70, Warren McClendon. I like them both. Broderick Jones, to me, he might be the best tackle in the class. I don't know if that's a common opinion out there. I see some people with him as 3rd or 4th. I think I like him the best. Young player, super controlled, physical, good movement skills. Like his ability to jump set and get on top of guys quickly. Not that he would come in and be the Bills' left tackle, but is he a guard candidate? Can he play right tackle? I mean, these guys are worth paying attention to. And then Warren McClendon just has absolute vines for arms, just a ton of length. A really experienced player, too, for Georgia, and has played at a high level for a number of seasons. So, as a potential developmental swing tackle, maybe some competition for Spencer Brown at right tackle. Warren McClendon is interesting to me. And then lastly, safety number 29, Christopher Smith. Who knows what's going to happen with Jordan Poyer in the offseason. But if they're looking for a player potentially on day 2, probably second round, that can come in and fill a number of roles, that's a physical tackler, has some ball skills, just a smart, cerebral player, Christopher Smith checks a lot of boxes that I think would fit well into the Bills' defense as a day 2 selection. So obviously Georgia has more players than that. Kenny McIntosh at running back's really good. They got cornerback Keely Ringo, but I really kind of want to focus in on the guys that I thought would be of interest to the Buffalo Bills and kind of narrow it down for those types of players to talk about here on this podcast. So hopefully you found some value in that and you enjoy watching the college football playoffs on Saturday evening. That's what I'll be doing on my New Year's Eve. So if there's football on, I'm watching it. So hopefully you are too. It's a great game. All right, folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the podcast and this week. And I guess this year on the podcast, the next time that we speak, it will be 2023, and we will be doing our final conversation before the Bills take on the Bengals on Monday Night Football. So come on back. Make sure you don't miss anything. Have a safe and wonderful weekend. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Again, Happy New Year. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again on Monday.